He almost missed it. A faint line slid through the background noise, just a smudge on the screen. It was August 2009, and most days at Fleet Intelligence Command were spent on drills and monitoring shipping traffic. However, this ping caused the analyst to pause. It had rhythm, precision. It was neither commercial nor friendly. He sifted through the noise, cutting clutter and interference until another signal emerged. It was clearer and closer, just off the continental shelf near Virginia. Checking the frequency against operation logs revealed no NATO drills or scheduled exercises. Concerned, he flagged it immediately, and a supervisor stepped in to take a closer look. Then, the second trace appeared further south, bearing the same unmistakable signature. The supervisor reached for the phone with quiet urgency. As the feed refreshed, one word surfaced in his mind: Akula. By the 1980s, the Cold War was nearing its end. On land and in the skies, détente flickered. But beneath the waves, the hunt had never been hotter. Flush with Reagan-era funding and technical superiority, the U.S. Navy had transformed the undersea battlefield into a silent, high-stakes arena. Los Angeles-class submarines, and soon the Seawolf, stalked the depths. For the Soviet Union, the gap was growing untenable. Their older boats, Victor IIs, Echo IIs, even the once feared Alphas, now broadcast their presence with every shaft rotation. NATO sonar nets heard everything that Moscow could throw their way, leaving them exposed. That changed in 1986, when something new slipped from the Northern Fleet's icy shadow. Project 971 Shtuka B, codenamed Akula by NATO. Unlike previous Soviet designs, which were no more than brute force engineering with a reactor welded to a frame, this was a masterpiece of stealth, a hunter cloaked in silence. The large Akula displaced nearly 13,000 tons submerged, featuring a classic Soviet double hull that allowed for extra ballast and improved survivability. At 111 meters long, it featured an elegant hydrodynamic sail and a teardrop-shaped pod atop the tail fin for a towed passive sonar array. Inside, an OK-650 pressurized water reactor, shared with Typhoon and Oscar II classes, cranked out 190 megawatts, powering submerged speeds of 33 knots and enabling dives to nearly 480 meters, about 200 meters deeper than Los Angeles-class boats. But it was the noise discipline that set Akula apart. Its propulsion was raft-mounted to damp vibration. Both inner and outer hulls were coated with anechoic tiles. Even limber holes had retractable covers to reduce acoustic returns. As a result, Akula's acoustic signature nearly matched the U.S. Navy's best, closing a gap once thought unbridgeable. When the first Akula began patrols in 1986, American sonar operators heard something horrifying. Soviet submarines had lost their distinctive sound. The rumble was gone. Now only a trace, a faint intermittent blip, might reveal their presence, often too late. In Pentagon briefings and NATO war rooms, one term echoed with grim finality: acoustic parity. For the first time in decades, U.S. carrier strike groups had to assume they were being watched, stalked, and hunted. John Anthony Walker sat at his desk in Norfolk amid the hum of machines and flickering fluorescent lights. To most, he was a balding, middle-aged naval communications specialist with a clearance badge and quiet demeanor. However, beneath that unassuming exterior burned desperation, greed, and simmering resentment. As he dug through shredded folders, cryptographic keys, and raw data from the Navy's most secret underwater units, he found the real key to American naval power: silence. It wasn't the carriers or battleships that mattered most. It was the submarines, built to move unseen and unheard. Their sonar signals simply vanished before anyone could track them. He copied everything: key lists, protocols, and detailed specifications revealing how U.S. submarines stayed hidden beneath the waves. Walker found blueprints for raft-mounted turbines, reactor vibration isolation diagrams, and memos emphasizing the importance of acoustic discipline. Minimizing cavitation, the noisy air bubbles trailing propellers, was crucial. Even the designs of screws were sculpted to reduce this telltale noise, keeping American subs invisible, long before detection. He delivered the secrets the old-fashioned way, by dead drop. Beginning in 1968, Walker passed packages of classified documents, often stored in trash bags or plastic containers, at pre-arranged drop sites like secluded parks, bridges, or forest trails across the East Coast. His primary KGB handler, believed to be codenamed Sergei, would retrieve them and leave cash in return: Over time, Walker recruited his son, brother, and friend Jerry Whitworth into the operation, turning it into one of the most damaging spy rings in U.S. naval history. By passing this treasure trove of secrets to Moscow, Walker fueled the Soviet Navy's leap forward in undersea warfare. In Soviet strategy rooms, generals and engineers pored over his documents like sacred texts. They'd come to terms with a harsh reality. Their Vickers 2s and Alphas were like loud claps in an ocean full of whispers. This failure sparked the creation of Project 971. Where Walker provided the Soviets with cryptographic keys and communications protocols, Jerry Whitworth, a U.S. Navy communications specialist and former cryptologic technician, delivered something even more corrosive: the architecture of American silence. He had access to the technical marrow of U.S. submarine stealth: how sound was trapped before it could escape, how turbines were floated on vibration-isolating rafts, how crews were trained in acoustic discipline down to the closing of hatches. Most critically, he handed over classified details on anechoic tile arrays, specially designed rubberized panels that absorb sonar pulses. For Soviet engineers, Whitworth's leaks were the missing pieces to the puzzle Walker had started. They no longer had to reverse engineer silence from sonar logs. They had it, page by page. As a result, vibrations from the OK-650 reactor and turbines were isolated on vibration-absorbing rafts and shock mounts, tuned to near-American precision. The final piece of the stealth puzzle was the propeller. It had 7 blades, carved from a solid block of high-grade steel, shaped with extreme care to cut down on noise. Every edge was fine-tuned to avoid cavitation, the tiny air bubbles that can give a sub away. Thanks to smart design and a little help from stolen American acoustic data, the Akula's propeller moved through water almost silently. Another key edge the Akula possessed was its double-hull design. While most Western submarines used a single pressure hull, the Akula went a step further by surrounding its inner hull with an outer shell, with a gap in between which acted like a silencer. That space soaked up vibrations and muffled engine noise before it could reach the water, making the sub a lot harder to hear and giving it a major stealth advantage. The double hull also enhanced survivability. If the outer shell was damaged, the inner hull could still maintain pressure, thereby protecting the crew. Covering that outer hull was a second layer of defense, thousands of anechoic tiles, effectively cloaking the Akula. Where earlier Soviet submarines roared, the Akula barely even whispered, becoming nearly untrackable. The Akula reached American ears during the early 1980s, when U.S. sonar operators began picking up faint acoustic signatures they couldn't identify. These weren't the usual clattering Soviet boats the Navy had learned to stalk and catalog. These were different, quieter, smoother, slipping through the GI-UK gap, the narrow corridor between Greenland, Iceland, and the United Kingdom with barely a ripple. The first real clue came from the seabed. SOSUS, the U.S. Navy's undersea listening network, started registering long-duration contacts that defied pattern recognition. Analysts at the Naval Ocean Processing Facilities noticed anomalies. They were logging faint, low-frequency traces that seemed to tail U.S. submarines or loiter in critical transit lanes. Something new was prowling the Atlantic, and it wasn't loud enough to be familiar. The tipping point came in 1985 with the launch of K-284, the first Akula. Satellite imagery and intercepted communications confirmed the Soviets had launched a new class of submarine from Severodvinsk. It was sleek, long, and fitted with a redesigned 7-bladed propeller and raft-mounted machinery. Much of the Akula class's dramatic leap in acoustic stealth can be traced back to a Cold War scandal that rocked the defense community in the 1980s, the Toshiba Kongsberg affair. Between 1983 and 84, Toshiba Machine Company, a subsidiary of the Japanese conglomerate, and Kongsberg Waffenfabrik, a Norwegian defense contractor, illegally exported precision 9-axis milling machines and sophisticated computer control systems to the Soviet Union, violating the Coordinating Committee for Multilateral Export Controls Agreement. These were advanced machine tools, specifically designed to shape submarine propeller blades to exacting tolerances, thereby eliminating imperfections that caused cavitation and noise. With better blades, Soviet engineers could produce submarines that were quiet enough to evade traditional sonar detection thresholds. American defense officials were outraged. Congressional hearings followed, and both companies were heavily sanctioned, but the damage had been done. Pentagon officials cautioned that the Soviet quieting gains were, quote, very serious and could cost the U.S. Navy billions of dollars to counter. Deep under the cold North Atlantic, where satellites couldn't see and no light reached, an Akula-class submarine moved quietly through the dark. In the glow of its control room, the crew tracked one thing: the distant sonar contact. It was a U.S. Los Angeles-class attack sub. The contact first appeared on the MGK 540 SCAT-3 sonar, a spherical bow array running in passive mode. It detected a faint acoustic signature, barely rising above the ocean's ambient noise, a low-frequency hum peppered with subtle blade rate modulations from the Los Angeles-class's propeller and mechanical murmurs from onboard systems. The skilled sonar operators isolated these signals, filtering through ocean thermal layers and pressure shifts, picking out the sub's unique acoustic fingerprint. Along the Akula's hull, Pelamida flank arrays extended its hearing, capturing sound from the sides as the American sub executed a slow turn. Using these side arrays, the Akula maintained contact even as its bow sonar's view narrowed. The entire acoustic field was mapped in real time, every bearing angle cross-referenced and fed into the MVU-110EM fire control computer. Without firing a single active ping, the MVU-110EM ran target motion analysis, using timestamp bearings to calculate the Los Angeles-class's speed, course, and depth. The Akula adjusted its trim tanks, quietly matching depth and velocity, maintaining a perfect covert trail just beyond the enemy's detection threshold. Should things turn hostile, Akula carried MiG-74 Korun decoys, such as the Bukta, programmable devices that emitted false acoustic signatures, mimicking the sub's own noise to confuse incoming torpedoes. The Akula could drop multiple decoys while dodging hard, tricking enemy subs into chasing shadows and wasting torpedoes. On top of that, it had jammers, noisemakers, and other tools to mess with enemy sonar and fill their screens with static and false readings to buy time or slip away. Combined with Akula's low acoustic signature, these tools sharply reduced the chance of detection or a successful attack. For now, those mechanisms would have to lie dormant. Western subs focused on staying quiet and striking with precision. The Soviets, though, still believed in hitting hard. The Akula was a mix of both mindsets, built with impressive tech, but armed to unleash enough firepower to tear through a whole convoy if needed. At the bow sat its arsenal: 8 torpedo tubes, 4 533mm and 4 650mm. The larger tubes could fire extended-range heavyweight torpedoes or be adapted to launch standard weapons, offering unmatched loadout flexibility. In total, the Akula could carry up to 40 weapons, a mix of torpedoes, anti-ship missiles, rocket-propelled depth charges, and naval mines. The USET-80 was its go-to 533mm torpedo, a wire-guided dual-role weapon capable of hunting submarines or surface ships with reliable precision. But the real hammer was the Type 65, a 650mm heavyweight designed to cripple or sink carrier strike group flagships. Traveling over 50 knots for more than 50 kilometers, it was a capital ship destroyer. Beyond torpedoes, the Akula carried the SSN-21 Samson, a cruise missile similar to the American Tomahawk, with a range of about 3,000 kilometers and a guidance system that followed the shape of the terrain that let the sub fire from far out at sea and still land a precise strike, all while staying out of sight from radar or air defenses. Later variants, such as the K-157 Vepr, were retrofitted to carry Calibre missiles, dramatically expanding mission profiles with precision strike options against land and sea targets, including a nuclear payload capability. The boat could also lay naval mines through its torpedo tubes, perfect for bottlenecks, and was equipped with a retractable Igla-M or Strela manpads for rare but vital air defense scenarios near the surface. All this firepower was coordinated through the MVU-110EM fire control system, networked with sonar inputs. Once a contact was classified, it could be targeted and engaged in seconds, without any guesswork or delays. Although no confirmed combat launches of Akula weapons are publicly known, the mere presence of such heavy firepower underscores exactly what kind of hunter the Akula was meant to be. The immediate answer to the Akula-class submarine was as technological as it was dramatic: the Seawolf class. Born from Reagan-era ambition and turbocharged by the Soviet acoustic leap, these submarines were larger, stealthier, faster, and capable of diving deeper than anything the U.S. had ever put to sea. Built with titanium-reinforced pressure hulls, advanced pump jet propulsion, the drastically reduced cavitation, and modular sonar arrays that could sweep wider swaths of ocean with pinpoint clarity, The Seawolf was a hunter's dream. Its quieting features, from raft-mounted machinery to anechoic coatings, made it almost undetectable at cruising speeds. Armed with 8 torpedo tubes and a massive weapons payload, it could strike with tomahawks, torpedoes, and even deploy SEAL teams via dry deck shelters. At a staggering $3 billion each, only 3 were built. They were designed to stalk Soviet boomers, shadow Akulas at depth, and survive a nuclear first strike. Budget realities and a post-Cold War shift in priorities led to a leaner but smarter successor, the Virginia class. Though less exotic, it was a modular, multi-mission platform that could be built at scale. Virginias featured pump-jet propulsion, composite sail structures, and open architecture electronics. They carried photonic masts instead of traditional periscopes, could launch drones and unmanned undersea vehicles, and even insert special forces in littoral zones. They were designed for network warfare, capable of collecting intelligence, launching precision strikes, or quietly watching foreign ports for weeks. Still, technology alone wouldn't win the silent war. The U.S. Navy overhauled its entire anti-submarine approach, investing in SOSUS upgrades, mobile surveillance platforms, and airborne ASW assets like the P-8 Poseidon. Sonobuoys became smarter, unmanned systems took on more risk, and data flowed faster through real-time battle networks. The cat-and-mouse game had gone global and deeper than ever. One of the Akula class's favorite hunting grounds was the Arctic. It's an acoustic wilderness where sound behaves unpredictably and satellites lose their ability to see. Built for deep-water patrols, Akulas were well-suited for operations in the high north. Their reinforced hulls, advanced navigation systems, and long endurance made them ideal for slipping beneath the polar ice. Later versions of the Akula could dive as deep as 500 to 600 meters, far enough to slip beneath layers of the ocean that degrade sonar performance. These natural thermal layers made them harder for enemy sensors to track them, giving Akula crews opportunities to evade detection. One of the most critical maritime choke points in this arena is the GI-UK gap. During the Cold War, it served as NATO's underwater tripwire, layered with fixed SOSUS sensors and stocked by maritime patrol aircraft. Soviet submarines, including early Akulas, routinely attempted to slip through it into the wider Atlantic. While exact routes remain classified, open-source tracking and naval reporting suggest that Akulas have continued testing those waters well into the 21st century. K-157 Vepr, a modernized Akula II, is one of the class's most active boats. Defense analysts and satellite data have tracked her operating beyond the GI-UK barrier and under Arctic ice as recently as 2023. This became a tactical nightmare for Western navies. Accustomed to relying on long-range sensors and surveillance networks to dominate the surface, a stealth submarine lurking beneath the fractured, drifting ice sheet was almost impossible to track, let alone target. In the spring of 1996, the Russian Navy launched one of its most audacious post-Cold War submarine operations. The target, a U.S. Navy Ohio-class SSBN, the most vital leg of America's nuclear triad. The Hunter K-154 Tiger, the second-generation Akula II attack submarine with next-generation stealth capabilities. The stakes were nothing less than America's confidence in its ability to remain hidden beneath the waves. Tiger slipped into the North Atlantic sometime between April and June. Navigating beneath the sonar webs of the GI-UK gap and avoiding patrol routes monitored by NATO aircraft and surface escorts, it found its quarry, an Ohio-class ballistic missile submarine transitioning between home port and a patrol area. What followed was a feat once thought impossible. The Akula tracked the Ohio closely, making use of its advanced MKG 540 sonar system, flank arrays, and specially designed quiet hull to stay out of sight. Russian officials saw the Tiger's patrol as a clear win. After years of budget cuts and fewer missions since the Soviet collapse, it proved their subs could still stand toe-to-toe with the West's best. The captain of K-154, Alexei Borlichev, earned the prestigious title of Hero of the Russian Federation, a rare honor, especially in peacetime, and a sign of how seriously Moscow valued this achievement. The mission was cited in Russian defense circles as proof that acoustic parity had been reached, if not breached. For the U.S. Navy, the news was a hard wake-up call. The Ohio-class SSBNs, long thought to roam undetected, had been quietly tailed for days. That sobering reality pushed the Navy to ramp up efforts by investing more in sonar countermeasures, cutting down their sub's noise signatures and mixing up patrol routes to stay one step ahead. During the 1990s and 2000s, Akula-class subs regularly tailed U.S. carrier strike groups. Sometimes they would surface deliberately within detection range to signal presence. At other times, they slipped in and out undetected, only to be discovered later in sonar logs or acoustic forensics. K-461 Volk, an early Akula-class submarine, was deployed to the Mediterranean Sea alongside the Russian aircraft carrier Admiral Kuznetsov in early 1996. Led by Captain First Rank Sergei Spravtsev, the Volk silently tracked several NATO submarines within the area. The deployment, though not widely reported at the time, stands as one of the first clear signs of Russia's post-Cold War push to reassert itself with bold undersea surveillance in disputed waters. Spravtsev would go on to deliver one of the most remarkable performances of modern submarine operations. In January 1999, while commanding K-317 Panther, he reportedly followed a U.S. strategic missile submarine undetected for 150 hours. For this feat, he was awarded the title of Hero of the Russian Federation for, quote, courage and heroism shown in the performance of military duty in conditions associated with a risk to life. While the Russian Ministry of Defense has never disclosed full details of the patrol, the award itself indicates exceptional operational success during a peacetime deployment. Open-source accounts and defense reporting suggest Panther became a reliable workhorse of Russian undersea intelligence throughout the late 1990s. It likely executed multiple long-duration covert patrols, possibly operating beneath the GI-UK gap or deep in the North Atlantic, where it gathered acoustic signatures of NATO submarines. These missions, though rarely publicized, contributed to refining Russia's sonar libraries and proved that even a second-generation Akula could challenge NATO's surveillance reach. Though the Pentagon never publicly confirmed these incidents, they triggered reflection inside U.S. naval circles. If an Akula could get that close without being heard, what else might be slipping through the cracks? In August 2009, without any sort of warning, 2 Russian Akula-class submarines took up position roughly 200 to 320 kilometers off the U.S. East Coast. Technically, they were operating in international waters, but it was easy to read the threatening subtext of their sudden appearance. It was the first time since the Cold War that Russian nuclear-powered attack submarines had patrolled so close to the U.S. mainland. Their presence so close to the eastern seaboard, within striking distance of American naval installations and ballistic missile sub-patrol routes, was an electric jolt to the Pentagon. The story leaked within days. The New York Times, The Telegraph, and other major outlets ran it on the front page, quote, Russian subs patrol off U.S. East Coast. Some saw it as a strategic probe, a test of U.S. detection thresholds. Others called it a deliberate throwback to Soviet-era chest-thumping. The Navy scrambled its response. P-3C Orions and other maritime patrol aircraft lifted off from coastal bases. SOSUS arrays were reanalyzed. ASW destroyers altered course to sweep the area. Submarines already on patrol were quietly redirected. The goal was twofold: track the Akulas and understand how long they'd been there before detection. If they'd crept in silently, and many suspected they had, it exposed gaps in the U.S. acoustic net, especially along traditional submarine transit lanes. Back in Moscow, officials downplayed the patrol as routine. However, the timing pinpointed to something less casual. The U.S. had just restarted missile defense deployments in Eastern Europe, while tensions flared in Georgia and Ukraine. The Akula's appearance felt like an underwater countermessage. Although they eventually departed, vanishing as silently as they had arrived, the mark their visit left is still being felt today. Naval budgets were revisited, sonar calibration protocols were revised, and behind closed doors, commanders admitted the obvious. The Cold War's weapons were just waiting for the right moment to reintroduce themselves. The Akula class has continually adapted, rearmed, and resurfaced. These submarines are still out there, hunting. Few stories illustrate their legacy better than one that began in India. In 2012, after long negotiations and refits, the Indian Navy commissioned INS Chakra, formerly K-152 Nerpa, under a 10-year lease from Moscow. Chakra was a true Akula II. Quieter, more automated, with modern fire control. She was a weapon and a classroom. With it at the forefront, India was building a future force of nuclear submarines and test driving the mechanics of strategic deterrence. However, Nerpa's path was marred by tragedy. During some sea trials in 2008, in the Sea of Japan, a fire suppression system triggered by error flooded her compartments with halon gas. 20 Russian crew members suffocated before alarms even finished sounding. It was one of the biggest casualties of any post-Soviet submarine disaster. Still, the vessel was repaired and delivered. Armed with cruise missiles and heavyweight torpedoes, Chakra became one of Asia's most advanced underwater predators. Her lease ended in 2021, but India moved to secure a second hull, nicknamed Chakra 3, though delays have kept her in limbo up to this day. Meanwhile, in Russia, the class has evolved in quieter but significant ways. K-331 Magadan, once an aging Akula 1, re-emerged around 2020 after a major overhaul, now loaded with Kalibr cruise missiles. Land attack, anti-ship, and anti-sub, Magadan is still striking from the deep. Others haven't stood down either. K-157 Vepr, a modern Akula 2, is still slipping beneath Arctic ice, surfacing in contested waters and diving past the GA-UK gap like a phantom. K-461 Volk, possibly rechristened Drakon, has been tracked lurking near the South China Sea and North Atlantic. The evolution of the Akula class culminated in K-335 Gepard, the only completed Akula 3. Laid down during the final years of the Soviet Union and finally commissioned in 2001, Gepard was longer and heavier than its predecessors. With a redesigned sail, an upgraded towed array dispenser, and even more advanced noise-dampening technologies. When it entered service, it was the most advanced attack sub in Russia's fleet, at least until the Yasen class came along. Though construction of Akula slowed dramatically following the USSR's collapse in 1991, the technological legacy endured. The lessons learned in hull damping, propulsion noise reduction, and stealth-informed design carried forward into the Yasen and Barai class boats.